You think the end of a world makes a sound, a horn, a fire in the sky, a voice from on high, telling you to be afraid. It does not. Mine ended in silence. I walked out to my hives at dawn, the way I had every dawn for 60 years, and the bees had stopped singing. I have kept bees long enough to know what that means. It means something larger has come, and the small things have felt it first. My name is Call. I have kept 200 hives on an agri-world called Ethan's Rest for 60 years, and 3 days ago a splinter of a Tyranid hive fleet turned toward us to eat the planet down to the rock. No horn came, no fire. Only my bees, gone quiet, telling me the one thing they had left to say. So here's the question I will leave you, while there is still someone to leave it with. When you finally know that nothing can be saved, not your home, not your work, not one thing you love, what do you do with the time that is left? I found my answer in the last 3 days of everything. Let me tell it slow, while a little time remains. Ethan's Rest is an agri-world. 400,000 souls, farmers mostly, scattered across grain that runs flat to the edge of sight in every direction. We grow it. We tithe it up the well to feed hive cities we will never see. Past that, we are left alone, which is the whole gift of a world too small to matter. No wars come here. Nothing comes here. The bulk haulers at harvest, the seasons and the long turning of an ordinary life. I never saw a hive city. I saw a picture, once, in the Scola, a gray mountain of metal where 1 billion people are stacked in the dark, and even as a boy I was glad I had been born under an open sky. We have so much sky here. A man stands small beneath it and doesn't mind. I stood small beneath it for 60 years, and I counted myself lucky, and I was. Should have known. A world that nothing ever comes to is exactly the kind of world that something one day comes for. My family has kept bees here for 9 generations. The first hives came down the well in the hold of a settlement ship. A few frames of sleeping bees carried across the dark, because a world of grain needs the small winged things that wake it. Without us, the fields thin and fail inside a generation. It is humble work. I have done nothing else. 200 hives and apiaries across the eastern grain. 50,000 bees to a hive. I know each one the way you know the rooms of your house in the dark. A beekeeper does not look at his bees. He listens to them. The hive speaks, and you learn its language across a lifetime. The low, contented hum, the higher whine of a hive that is frightened, the flat roar of a hive gone queenless, and under all of it, always one word, said by 50,000 small bodies at once: we are alive, we are alive, we are alive. A hive that hums is a hive that lives. My grandmother taught me that before I could read. She would press my hand flat to the warm wood and tell me to feel the life inside it, the thousands of small hearts beating as one warm engine. And she would say it. Call, a hive that hums is a hive that lives. I believed her. For 60 years the hives hummed, and I believed the wordless way a contented man believes, that they always would. It started with the silence. I have told you that. Let me tell you what it was to stand in it. 3 mornings ago, I walked out at dawn and the apiary was still. Not the stillness of cold, where the bees cluster deep and murmur low, a stillness with no murmur under it at all. I put my hand to the nearest hive and felt nothing. No warmth of motion, no thrum against my palm. Cool, dead wood. I opened it. The bees were there, all of them alive, clustered on the frames and trembling. Not working, not singing. Crouched in the dark, as still and frightened as I have ever seen a living thing. Every one of them turned the same way, listening to something I could not hear. I went hive to hive in the growing light. 200 of them. Everyone the same. 200 houses of silent, trembling bees, all listening, all afraid. The grain stood motionless in a windless dawn. No bird called. The sky was the wrong color. A flat, pale gray with no warmth in it, and not a cloud in it either. I have felt fear before. The fear of a bad harvest, of fever in the winter, the ordinary fears of an ordinary man. This was not mine, it was theirs, and a man who has listened to the living world his whole life cannot stand in the middle of its terror and keep his own heart warm. Something was coming. My smallest creatures had felt it days before any vox could name it, and they had stopped singing. A hive that hums is a hive that lives. Mine had gone quiet. I did not yet know what that would cost. That night the stars went out. Some of them. A beekeeper knows the sky. I have watched it wheel over these fields every clear night of my life. I know its patterns the way I know my own hands. And that night, standing cold among my silent hives, I looked up and saw a piece of it wiped clean. A ragged patch low in the east, where the evening stars should have hung, had gone black, as though something vast and unlit had risen between my world and the deep and blotted them out with its body. Around the edge of it bled a faint, sick light, green and purple, the color of a deep bruise. No star I had ever seen made that light. I had no word for it. I have the word now. The men on the Vox had it in the days that followed, in voices far better informed than mine and just as afraid. The shadow in the warp. The dark the creatures cast ahead of themselves as they cross the void that drowns out prayer and blinds the astropaths and fills men with a dread they cannot name. It was already total over us. No message had left our world in 2 days. Our prayers were not reaching the Emperor. We were alone inside the shadow and had been longer than anyone knew. The bees felt it first. Of course they did. They have no walls of language and reason to hide behind. When the great cold mind in the dark fell across our world, it struck them bare, and they stopped their singing and crouched and trembled. I stood in my field and looked at the hole in the stars and felt, for the first time, the edge of what they had carried for 2 days. A pressure, a nearness, a vast patient attention turned toward my small world and beginning, slowly, to come down. There was one Vox set in our district in the back room of the shrine, and by the second day everyone who could walk had crowded around it. I went too, though I'm not a man for crowds. I stood at the back among farmers I had known my whole life, their faces gray in the lamplight, and we listened to the static and the broken voices that swam up out of it. The reports came in pieces, relayed and re-relayed, rotting as they crossed the shadow. A hive fleet. That was the phrase that came through clear, and that no one in that room had ever heard said about our own sky. A splinter, they said. a fragment, broken off one of the great migrations, too small to trouble a proper world with its fortresses and fleets, just large enough to take us. There would be no evacuation. Understand that this was not cruelty. It was arithmetic. 400,000 farmers on a minor world, inside a total shadow no ship could safely enter or leave. To send ships in to lift even a fraction of us was to lose those ships for nothing. And the Imperium does not spend ships on grain farmers who are already, by every measure the great ledger keeps, lost. The voice that finally spoke to us directly was young, and it was kind. That is what I remember. An officer somewhere above us in the dark, and he was honest, and he told us no help was coming, and he asked our forgiveness, and then the shadow took him, and the static came back, and that was the last voice we ever heard from the stars. Young hauler mechanic near the set would not have it. Clever hands, used to fixing things. He kept asking the dead Vox questions, as though the right one would bring the kind officer back with a different answer. Could we not hide? Could we not go deep into the silos, under the ground? Could we not fight them? 400,000 pairs of hands. The old men let him talk. We did not say what we already knew, that you do not hide from a thing that has not come to find you, but to eat the world you would hide in. He had a young man's belief that effort is always answered. It is a good belief for fixing haulers. It is a cruel one to carry to the end of the world. On the morning of the third day, the animals ran. I woke before dawn to a sound I had never heard, a low, continuous rush, like wind through grain, but deeper. And I went out and saw the land itself was moving. Every living thing that could run or fly or crawl was going west, away from the east, away from the bruise light that had spread now across half the sky. The grazing beasts from the southern farms in their hundreds, through my fields, trampling the grain, eyes white and rolling. Birds streaming low and desperate in one direction, more birds than I knew the world held. The small things in the grass pouring west in a living carpet, all of them silent. That was the horror of it. So much fleeing life and not one cry in it, because the thing they fled is not a thing you cry out against. The bees did not run. Bees cannot leave the hive. It is their whole world. They would sooner die in it than abandon it. And I think that is why I have always loved them, the foolish, faithful constancy of the thing. They stayed in their 200 houses and trembled and waited, as I had decided somewhere in the night that I would stay in mine. I stood in my doorway and watched a world's worth of animals pour past toward a west that held no safety, and a great calm settled over me, the calm of a man who has stopped hoping, and in the same motion stopped being afraid. The hoping is most of the fear. I had not known that. Set the hoping down, and what is left is lighter than you would believe. So, on the last afternoon of my world, I harvested honey. I know how that sounds. The neighbors who had not locked themselves in the shrine to pray thought old Call had lost his mind. Out in his veil and gloves, smoking his hives calm and lifting the frames one last time while the sky curdled green above him. Let me tell you why I did it. I did it because it was mine to do. In 60 years, the work was never once pointless, and I would not let the last of it be pointless either. The bees had made the honey in good faith through a good summer before the dark came, and it seemed a sin to let that last sweetness rot in the comb. My hands knew how. A man should spend his last hours doing the thing his hands know, the thing that made him himself, not wringing them in a corner. I lifted the frames, and they were heavy and warm and gold, and the bees, even in their terror, let me take the honey, because we had an old agreement, the bees and I, 9 generations old, and neither of us broke it at the end of the world. I filled every jar I owned. I worked until the light failed, which was early because the thing in the sky was eating the light now. And when I was done, I had a whole table of honey, gold, and faintly glowing in the dark, the last harvest of Ethon's rest. I sat and looked at it. It was the best thing I have ever made, and I made it in the last hours for no one, and I have never been prouder of anything. Then the sky filled, and I learned what the darkness had been. It came down through the high air at dusk. I took it for a cloud at first, an impossible black cloud climbing the eastern sky, and then I saw it was not climbing. It was descending, and it was not a cloud. It was a ship, if the word can hold it, a thing of dark organic matter the size of a mountain range, ridged and veined and glowing faintly along its flanks with the same bruise light I had seen among the dead stars. It came down slow. That was its own horror. Unhurried, certain, the way a hand comes down toward a thing it means to pick up because the thing cannot run. I spent my life serving one kind of swarm. When a hive grows too full of life to hold, the old queen takes half the city and leaves in a roaring golden cloud to begin again somewhere new. Life so abundant it must split in two and go looking for more world to fill. I thought I understood what a swarm was. I did not know the dark held another kind, the same hunger to spread and fill and consume, run cold and starlit through a thing the size of fleets. One swarm stops and leaves you honey. The other does not stop and leaves you nothing. It blotted out what was left of the sun, and from its underbelly there began to fall a fine, glowing rain. The spores reached me near nightfall, and they did not kill me, and that was almost the worst mercy of all. I had wondered in a far-off way whether it would hurt. It did not. The glowing rain drifted down and settled on my veil and my shoulders and the backs of my gloved hands, and where it settled I felt a faint, cool tingle, and nothing more. The spores are not made to kill a man. Why would they be? A man is a small amount of biomass, hardly worth a poison. They are made to break down the green world, the grain, the grass, the living skin of a planet, into a soup the larger things can drink. I was incidental. I would die when the air thickened with rot, or when the larger things came, but not as a target, as a bystander to my own extinction. I walked through it to my farmstead. The grain on either side of the path was gone, collapsed into black, slick ruin, and the smell of it was the smell of the inside of a living thing, hot and wet and wrong. My boots sank. The ground was beginning to soften, to be digested, and through all of it the rain came down so gently, so beautifully, points of cold green light drifting in the dark. If you did not know what it was, you would have called it lovely. Some part of me called it lovely even knowing. I reached my porch. I took off the veil and the gloves. There was no longer any reason for them. Nothing would sting me now. We were all of us past stinging. And I sat down in my chair, in the dark, in the gentle poison rain, with my table of gold beside me, to watch the rest of it come in. You want to know what they look like, the creatures. I will tell you, but I will not dwell, because they do not deserve the dwelling, and because they were, in the end, the least of it. They came up out of the east in the last light, across the stripped black land, and there were so many that the ground itself seemed to move, chitin and claw in 1,000 shapes, some no bigger than a dog and some tall as a barn, all the same wet purple-gray, all moving with the same awful unity. Not like an army. An army is made of men who could each choose to run. This was one creature with 1,000,000 bodies, a tide, a sickness given legs. They poured across my dead fields, and where they passed, they left nothing. Not bones, not ruins. They took the rot the spores had made, and the beasts that had not run far enough, and my praying neighbors in their shrine, and they took it all down into themselves and moved on. And behind them the land was not even land. It was bare gray rock, scoured and steaming. I thought of the young mechanic and hoped he had found something to fix at the end, some pump to put his clever hands to, so he did not have to stand empty before a thing that could not be fixed. I thought of my neighbors, praying as the walls came down, and I did not think their prayers wasted, though they would not be answered, because a prayer is a way of facing the dark with words instead of silence, and there is dignity in choosing the words you go into the dark with. They had their prayers. The young man had, I hope, his work. I had my bees and my honey and my candle, and I understood, sitting there, that these were the same thing. They were what we had each chosen to be doing when it came. Not to stop it. Nothing stops it. Only to be ourselves fully, right to the last second, so that what ended was a someone, and not just a quantity of warmth on a cooling world. So, here is what I did with my hour. Here's the answer I promised you, back when there was still a world to ask the question in. I lit my candle, the one I keep for the harvest night prayers, and set it on the table beside the honey. I opened a jar, the best of them, the pale gold from the high summer combs, and I ate a little, slowly with a wooden spoon, the way I've eaten the first honey of every harvest of my life. It was very good, the best I have ever tasted, and I have tasted 60 years of it, not only the fear sharpening it. The bees had made it in a good summer none of us knew was the last, and the whole of that vanished summer was in it. The sun, the grain flowers, the long gold afternoons, gathered up by small faithful creatures and pressed into one jar for an old man to taste at the end of the world. Then I did the thing that mattered most. I went out to my oldest hive, the one descended from my grandmother's hive, and I opened it one last time, and I did not smoke it, and I took nothing from it. I put my hand flat on the warm wood, the way she taught me, and I felt for the life inside. And the bees were humming, faintly. A low, trembling note, but a note. The old word, "We are alive, we are alive, we are alive." They had started again, at the very end. I do not know why. Perhaps the shadow was so close now that it had stopped mattering. Perhaps they were simply alive and could not help but say so. And I stood with my hand on the hive and hummed it back to them. An old man singing to his bees in the dark while the world ended. And for one moment the hive hummed and I believed. the wordless way a contented man believes that the humming was the only thing that had ever mattered. They took Ethon's rest in a single night. By the dawn, that wasn't really a dawn, because the thing in the sky still ate the light. There was nothing left of my world but bare gray stone and the slick of what had been alive. The hive ships drew their harvest up through the dark air in glowing rivers and turned, slow and replete, back toward the deep and the rest of their endless migration. This is how it always goes, I am told by no one, because there is no one left to tell me anything. The Great Devourer comes to a world. It does not negotiate. It does not hate. It leaves nothing behind, and then it goes. And the world it leaves is not a ruin, because a ruin still remembers what it was. It leaves a clean stone, scoured of memory as though life had never touched it. No graves, no monuments, no ruins for some later wanderer to find and wonder at. Just rock and the true silence. The silence my bees had been warning me of from the first gray morning. The silence of a place where the humming has stopped and will not start again. 400,000 of us, 9 generations of beekeepers, a whole small green world, and the sky is still up there, I suppose, the great pale dome. But there is no one left beneath it to be small and grateful under. And a sky with no one to stand under it is just the dark, starting a little higher up. I do not know how I am still telling you this. I do not think I am in any way you would understand. I think the telling is the last of me, the way the humming was the last of them. A small warmth saying itself into the dark, for as long as it can, before the dark finishes its work. So let me finish, while the finishing is mine. If there is one thing I would have you carry out of the quiet of wherever you are listening, it is not a warning. No warning would save you. If the Great Devourer chooses your world, nothing will. And most worlds it does not choose. And you will likely die the small ordinary death the lucky ones die. In a bed, under a sky, with the world still humming around you. So it is not a warning. It is the answer to my question. When you know that nothing can be saved, you save nothing. You do the work your hands know, one last time, because it was never pointless and you will not let it become pointless now. You taste the sweetness the faithful small things made for you out of a summer that is gone. You put your hand on the warm, trembling life that is left, and you sing back to it the only word it has, the word that stays true right up to the final second and is not made one bit less true by the dark that comes after. A hive that hums is a hive that lives. My world has gone to silence and bare stone, and the great hungry hive has moved on to hum its note over some other warm and unsuspecting place. But somewhere, in the last of me, in this telling that is the last of me, an old man still has his hand on a wooden hive, and the bees are still singing, faint and trembling and alive, and they have not stopped. And I have decided, because it is the last thing left to decide, that they never will. We are alive, for one more moment in the only place that is left, which is this telling, which is you, listening. We are alive